Anything from you? Great. I sat in on a meeting with Open Doors because they're ramping up for the holiday season, and just with inflation, have a lot more need. And so I have some contact information for how maybe we best can coordinate some efforts to help with some of these kids. In fact, they used to only take donations like Toys for Tots and things that they do to help around holiday time. They used to cap it at age 14 for some reason. I guess they think kids from 15 to 18 were needed Christmas, but they've actually changed that. And so that's what they need the most of, in fact, is the donations for that. So they have some cool ideas about how they're going to try to get meals for people and gifts for kids during the holiday season, because they've seen a pretty substantial increase in the necessity for those services. Other than that, I don't think, we have interim committees going on with the legislative body down in Salt Lake. I don't really think there's anything in terms of an update that I need to share with that. So with that, we'll move on to the next sec. We're going to change the agenda item a little bit. We're going to first hear a presentation on the West Davis Corridor Economic Development. Is that you?
It is.
Perfect. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. I am pleased to present to you this evening Rob Sant, who's from Lewis Young, Robertson, and Birmingham. They were picked a couple of years ago. We were accepted for a grant to do an economic impact study of the West Davis Corridor for several of the interchanges along the West Davis Corridor. There were 5 cities that were involved in that grant, and we were given that grant. There were several applicants that applied, and Lewis Young was selected for that grant. So Robert's here. His father's a legend, and he's following in his footsteps, and he's doing a great job. As many of you might know, he worked for the county for a couple of years, and then returned to Lewis Young. But we're happy to have him here, and he will present to you the findings from that study and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for that, Lon. Happy to be here, and thank you, members of the council, for this opportunity. So yeah, a little backstory. So I was the Davis County Economic Development Director for 2019 to 2021, and my first 6 months on the job, I wanted to meet with each of the cities and kind of find out what their economic development goals were and strategies. And as I met with West Point, Syracuse, Layton, Kaysville, and Farmington, they all mentioned the West Davis Corridor and what type of benefit could they see on that future corridor. And so I said, instead of everyone doing their individual plan, let's maybe take a cohesive approach and look at all the interchanges together, try to get a grant. So we were successful in getting a $160,000 grant, and all in, I believe each city had to pay $1,500. So really good bang for the buck.
Where was the grant from?
TLC is from Wasatch Front Regional Council. So it was the Transportation Land Connection Grant. So with that, as Lon mentioned, it was a long time coming to get to this point, but we completed the study, and now we're just meeting with all of the councils in this work session type setting to go over the findings of the study. I do want to mention that this was completed with a market lens, not necessarily general plan lens, not necessarily what you would like to see developed, just as what could the market support for each of these interchanges. And the goal of this study is that you use this as a council to make decisions on land use, on things like that, going forward for your interchanges. But it's not necessarily a document that's like, okay, now let's add this density, let's add this stuff. It's just completely with what can the market afford in each of these interchanges. So I'm going to fly through a lot of these. You'll see there's 30 slides, and we're going to go through a lot of these and just get to the meat of the study, the findings that we had. But as Lon mentioned, 7 interchanges going from Farmington to West Point. Technically, there are 2 here. The 4 is Layton, and the 5 is Kaysville-Layton. But the Kaysville-Layton one, all of the land in Layton City is in the wetlands, the protected. So we didn't include that in this study because there's no benefit to Layton on that one. It's all on the Kaysville side. So just quick through the demographics. So population, this was from the census, so 81,773. Sure, that's gone up since there. And really these demographics we're showing is kind of just when a business or a development happens, they kind of look at population, education, medium income, and things like that. So household adjusted gross income, this is adjusting for kind of the taxes and stuff, so it's not necessarily the household income. So Layton is above Utah, a little below the county. This kind of just shows all of the incomes across the state. So Layton is kind of middle to high of all the other cities in the state. Age, even with glasses I can't see what that says, 28.5 we're going with. But so Layton is young, younger than the county and the state of Utah. That's something that businesses really look at is kind of with that workforce, what's that age distribution. So that's a big plus for Layton is you have a young population. Education, so 37% of the population has associate's degree or higher. That's a little less than Davis County and the state of Utah, but still good.
Higher than the nation.
And then taxable sales. So this is kind of interesting. This, so you know, and you're all aware of this. I remember when I was at the county, it's when we talk Layton, we talk billions, and that's the case. So this kind of shows you from 2011 to 2020 what your gross taxable sales are. So anywhere from 1.1 billion to 1.8 billion. You've seen about a 5.3% growth over that period of time. And I just kind of wanted to show what the county is, and you're anywhere from a quarter to higher of the whole county sales, which is awesome. On the other presentations, I showed a comparison of all the cities, but yours looked really silly because you were so much higher than all the other ones. So that's why I did it this way. And this is kind of a snapshot. This kind of shows where your taxable sales are by location. So the darker the red and the bigger the better, or the higher amount of sales. So no surprises here, all along the I-15 corridor. What's interesting is some of these you'll see up in maybe the residential areas. So this also takes into account house sales or online sales. But an example that we like to use is in Fruit Heights, they had a really big one that was in the middle of a residential community, and we're like, well, that's weird. And they had a woman who was one of the top Spanx salesmen in all of the country. And so she was having tons of sales tax coming out of her home. So that's why you see some of those red dots there. But
well, I'm curious what's down there on the southwest corner. That's
Yeah.
a red dot.
J&J.
No, they're on Gentile.
They're above the arrow.
Right
clear
down, right above the
Yeah.
arrow. Is it Preston? Maybe with Prince?
No, that's the deal where.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. This would be farther west.
so overall, no surprise here. Layton's a regional
Yeah,
draw
farms.
when it comes to sales. So overall, we look at retail, industry, services, and other. And if you're above 100%, it means people are coming into your city for their sales. If you're below 100, then it means you're leaking some of the sales. So overall, looking at all the categories, you're 99%. But the retail one is the one that we really focus on. You're capturing 107%. But that's not saying you're not leaking in some of the categories. So you're doing really well in auto, in general merchandise, in food, but then sporting goods and some of those other ones, there's room to grow there as well. And then the bottom one, the buying power, this just shows, so right now you're, with what we have, that 1.6 billion, but then between the population that we're seeing, so you're gonna have about 33,000 more people between now and 2040, you have an opportunity just with that buying power of that growth to capture another $770 million of gross taxable sales. So then we went to kind of the market, and the first thing we want to do is look at what competition we have. So this first one is the office market. Kind of in here in the I-15 corridor is where it's really represented well, but there's definitely room to grow with office sites. And this shows kind of a 1 mile and a 2 mile buffer. So you'll see here the West Davis corridor is where we really don't have any office. Industrial is a little better, but same thing, really along the I-15 corridor. We do have the Eastgate here, and then this is the Ninigret in Syracuse. And then for commercial and retail, this is a mixture of accommodation, entertainment, regional and neighborhood. There is some existing, not really a lot of regional, and then no accommodation as well with this one. And that's something we should do with Syracuse is there's opportunity for them to have a hotel to capture their Antelope Island traffic, but not really for Layton. So this is just a brief overview of the trends. So the industrial market's very strong. We're really seeing flex buildings popping up and being fully occupied. And of all the real estate and the industrial, office, retail, and residential, industrial was the one that was affected the least by COVID. That one's kind of just stayed strong. The office market is still in flux. Met with EDC Utah the other day, and they were saying that nationally there's a feeling that office is going to come back on. So that's good for the office market and the future development with that. Retail's doing well in the county as well, and it's projected to continue to grow. It is transitioning from your traditional retail to more of an experience-based retail, but there is room in the market for additional retail in Davis County. And then residential, we all know what's happening there. Vacancy rates are at record levels. In 2021, more than half of Utah's households can't afford a medium-priced home. So, and the Wasatch Front's experiencing the lowest levels of housing stock. So there's definitely room for residential everywhere. We won't really spend a lot of time on this, but this is how we kind of decided what type of growth we could see in the corridor. So we did kind of an analysis to see what industries are growing and emerging. And then this is a snapshot of that. So information, management of companies, warehousing and storage. So really a good mix of retail, office, and industrial. Then we took that data and kind of said, what are the projected short-term jobs and long-term jobs? And with that, in the Davis and Weber County markets, there's projected to be about 18,500 jobs between now and 2040, and about 4.6 million square feet of office space that will be needed. Industrial, 18,000 jobs, 37 million square feet of industrial, and about 2,400 acres. And then retail, about 22,000 jobs, about 11 million needed square feet, and 2,200 acres. And then for residential, we looked at kind of what exists in each city. So your typical single family, all the way up to 20 or more units. And is there a low local concentration or a high? And definitely, which you're all aware of, Layton performs the best when it comes to that mix of residential in the city. And then this is kind of what the demand is. So we're showing that Layton, about 17,000 more housing units within the next 20 years are what's needed to support the population growth. So now the good stuff, the potential development. So this is the node that we studied. So this is Gentile, Hillfield Road, and then this will be the interchange right here. Originally, this is the buffer that we looked at, but Lon and Chad asked if we could maybe extend it a little more to also include this vacant land, so we went ahead and did that. So this is kind of what we show as the supportable future development. So about 307 acres, and of that, we kind of broke it down to neighborhood retail and neighborhood office, which is more up towards Gentile, and residential will be that way too. So 10 acres of neighborhood retail, about 95,000 square feet, 4.59 acres of neighborhood office, about 25,000 square feet. And then we've identified this node as one that really has the potential to have a very significant regional business park. And we're showing that, and that would be a mix of flex space, office, industrial users, and about 3.3 million square feet for that. And then 82 acres of residential, which we have at about 414 units. And then we wanted to kind of show it on a diagram of what it could look like. So that residential, commercial, and neighborhood office is kind of up in this area, but as you're kind of still planning what that could look like, we didn't include that in the diagram. We just included what that business park could look like. So this kind of shows what it would be on a map. And as we mentioned before, this is where you kind of see your office buildings right there along the frontage, so the good visibility. And as you went further north, is where you get a lot of that flex space industrial use. And then we included kind of a 3D rendering of what that could look like. And then the last part is this is what the fiscal benefit could be for you. So the retail, office, business park, and residential, we did about a 20-year absorption schedule, so between now and 2039, a total taxable value of over about $500 million, and then the potential jobs and residents, you're looking at about over 3,000 new jobs and about 1,300 new residents is the potential impact. And then the revenue you could see as a city, your average annual revenue, you're about $440,000 in property tax, $145,000 in sales tax, and $202,000 in franchise tax for a total average annual revenue of $784,000. Then we looked at the whole 20-year projections, and you're about $15.7 million over 20 years. I just wanted to note that that actual benefit is likely much higher, because this just shows the benefit from the development, not those people are gonna shop and you're gonna see future development as well. So the actual impact of the West Davis corridor for Layton is much higher than what we're showing here. So lots of data. Any questions?
So the council is aware this is a shortened version, and I have a full version. If you would like to have that, I can make copies and
It's a nice, easy 119-page read.
And you did all the work on it?
Well, being that we had two other fair peers did some of the transportation stuff, and then MHTN did the renderings.
Wow.
So I just put it together and did the analysis. And
So I'm curious, on this diagram here, all those blue buildings, you're seeing those as like warehouse?
so a business park, so it would be a mix. So this is kind of what we envision on these pictures. So there would be some kind of the flex space that you see where you have office users and some industrial users. Could be bigger industrial users, but then also office as well, research park. So kind of a mix of really kind of what you have at Eastgate, but with more office and kind of a place where you have a lot of employees there. And
we also envision that like Miki Couture, where you have some retail or an office up in the front, you know, maybe some R&D in the back.
And by far, we think will have the most office. And this one, and then the West Point Syracuse one, we're showing that as also having a regional flex space type of thing, but this one would have more of that office research feel.
This is part of in the big packet. Is there any study on possible public transportation, either regional rail or light rail, east-west?
So that wasn't part of the scope of this study, but that would be definitely something that I think we could take this study and then approach WFRC and see if there's a way we could study that a little more. We did look at what the average daily traffic counts would do, but we didn't really look at that type of transportation.
Is that in the full report?
No, not the traffic stuff is, yes, yeah.
And is that primarily on the West Davis corridor?
Yeah,
Are you
so it shows-
anticipating exiting?
it shows the West Davis corridor and also those roads from the exiting. But what's interesting is when we did this study, and that's something that Lon brought up, is WFRC needs to update kind of their impact maps because they didn't show that this would be a big employee increase, which it will be. So I think that's something that they mentioned too, is using this study to update some of their future projections.
How many, what was the number on the number of necessary residents, like new residents, new bills, that we need to have in the next 2 decades to keep up with population growth? You mentioned it.
So we show here just taking what your average household size is and your population increase, that you'll need 16,833 new residential units.
And that section of our city, which is one of the biggest open spaces that we have left in the city, but this potential development scenario would only have 414. Is that right?
And that's what we're showing, yeah, so that's how many units you would have there based off of kind of the density, but depending on how many units you allow per acre and things like that, that number obviously could increase.
Well, it's a lot of good information for us. With Wasatch Front Regional Council, they do so much good work to help us plan properly. My only worry is with a lot of this stuff is that it's based on, I guess my own concern is that we just have to have places for people to live too. And I just want to make sure that as we discuss as a council, we planning in the right way, making sure we're going in the right way so that, the development, the financial aspect of making $15 million over 20 years is great, but we want your kids and my kids and your kids to be able to have a place to live and the entire area as a business park. I'm not sure that's what I have in mind. But we'll see how development goes. We've got to build the road and then see what happens. But I think it's good to have this information about, especially with how in depth it's gone and all the models and everything. It's great. So thanks for putting it together.
Yep.
It's very, very good to see it visually because I think we hear a lot about the planning and it's almost kind of in the clouds a little bit. So it's nice to see it with figures and with models. So thank you for putting it together and presenting. Very hopeful.
Second point on that, just to add, it's okay, is that I think Robin mentioned this is about 300 acres. In West Layton, there's probably north of 2,000 acres that are left to be able to develop. But one of the things that the staff, we know you understand this as well, but the staff is excited about this prospect is because this is providing family sustaining jobs, which is an important piece, just like the Eastgate Business Park. And so these would not be primarily lower paid retail jobs, if that makes sense, but manufacturing, industrial, professional types of jobs that will sustain those families that will come. And so the city's always felt like that's an important balance, is to have places for people to live, obviously, but also places where they can work and not have to commute to Salt Lake or Weaver County, and great places where jobs pay sufficient enough so families can do that and stay here without having to commute. So it's a delicate balance, and we completely agree with you.
Yeah, that's the balance. Because you see all the jobs that are created, that's great. That's what we want. We want to make sure that people have jobs and they can support their families. We just want to make sure that the people that we can have people live here too. So you're right, it's just a balancing act to try to make sure we do it the right way.
And that's something that would be good about seeing the whole report. Not saying that we don't want to have the residential units in Layton, but a lot of the Syracuse ones that are just north of here, they don't have this vacant land mass. So most of those are heavily residential. So within close proximity, but I think as Alex said, I think there's definitely room in West Lake for that residential as well. This one?
Yeah, right there. Go back.
We'll do that.
I was just looking, because I know that one area we've already approved the development, so I was curious how you was working it. What your speculation was around the area that we've already rezoned.
Northwest corner,
Yeah,
below Gentile.
yeah. So, okay. I think that pretty much goes in line with what you originally planned, right? John?
Yeah, this is consistent with the general plan and all the work that you put into that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I remember going through
previously.
that whole thing.
Right, and this is just to give you an idea of what that would look like, at least a lot of the square footage. We have another illustration we put together that shows about 1 million square feet. And it's a lot more than you think it is when you look at it on the ground. So I think the best part of this study is it shows us that it's consistent with our general plan and our goals and the work that you did previously. And we're confident now, especially that it can support those ideas.
Yeah, do you have any other questions? Do you want to continue? You're welcome to.
Go ahead. That's right. I said like in time the power's over. That's
Good run.
Thank you very much. Good information.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to go on to our presentation regarding the compatible land use, right? Is that what we are?
I'll just do just a brief introduction. We're very pleased, Mayor and Council, tonight to have some representatives of the Compatible Lands Foundation. We've got Joe Knott, Darren Miller here with us tonight. About 2.5, 3 months ago, we had an opportunity to sit down with Joe and his staff and learn more about the Compatible Lands Foundation, what their kind of mission and purpose is, how they relate to the efforts that are going on around Hill Air Force Base. It was good for us to learn that information. We learned a lot about their organization and some of the things that they're doing, and how they interact with the city and the base and the work they're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Joe, and we'll get a little presentation, and we'll have time for some questions after. So
Thanks,
Joe,
Richard.
if you want to.
Oh, it's too boring to turn the stand. This is okay.
Take it away.
Recliner. So again, good evening, Joe Knott. I'm with the Compatible Lands Foundation. Tonight, as we said, we're going to do a quick who are we, and most importantly, how do we tie into Hill Air Force Base and the program they have that conserves land outside the base so that folks can keep flying. And just want to start, obviously, we've already were here last evening, so positive thoughts and prayers, please. The pilot's doing well, physically and mentally. I'm sure it's a harrowing experience, so just keep those positive thoughts going. And everybody in the base, we met with the base today, we appreciate it. So we're going to start, I'll hand these out here a little bit. I want to introduce real quick Darren. Darren is our guy on the ground here, lives in Bountiful right now. Has a little history at Hill. We went to elementary school there before I was born.
Before it got torn down.
And so he's our full-time person on the ground here. I live in Phoenix, so it doesn't snow where I live. And my flight leaves earlier tomorrow. I'm not kidding, but I don't do that white stuff there. Knows that. So I'm going to jump, make sure I get the right next slide.
Start the slideshow there.
Oh,
Yeah, I'll start it.
oh, thanks, sir. And again, a little bit about me, just so you know, kind of my perspective. Did my 33 years, 6 months in the Army, 33 years, 31 countries. Loved it, so I'm very biased, so you probably pick up on that. But the best thing ever happened to me and kept me straight. And so I come from that background. I did my last 7 years at the Pentagon, doing sustainability, climate, engineering, Battalion Command Iraq, Company Command Iraq. But so I carry that proudly, that baggage. And I'm also a little tree hugger, so I believe in taking care of what we have for the kids and the grandkids. And so I've had a great opportunity the last several years to work at Compatible Lands, and now I'm the executive director. So I messed up, I did a typo, now I'm the boss. So that's good. But we're going to start with, again, we're all here to talk about Hill Air Force Base. See, mine's a little different, I'm sorry.
Well, allegiance events.
Okay, thank you. It makes it easier.
You just tell us when. Yeah.
When, please. So, and again, I'm going to apologize now for all the acronyms. I'll try to depending on this, but so REPI, you'll see that first slide. It's an acronym for what the Department of Defense calls their buffer program, compatible land use program. There's probably 102, 104 bases around the country have these programs now. Each one stands alone by itself. Each one competes for money, and each one we'll talk about in a sec has a Joe Knott and a Darren working for them. So the Hill Air Force Base there, again, is they have a buffer program that started in 2017. I'm going to talk about that. I think it definitely relates to what everybody here at the table talks about, thinks about, makes decisions about. Talk about what an eligible entity is, and then what organizations in Layton, in the town, in surrounding areas for Hill can be part of that partnership. Next slide, please. How it works, again, fancy words for we're a nonprofit, and an encroachment management agreement is a cooperative agreement. It says that we as a nonprofit who protects land, a land trust, and the Air Force in this case who wants to make sure that the flights can keep flying, the training can keep happening. We have a partnership. That's a 5-year partnership. We're just renewing this month for another 5 years under this REPI program, which Readiness Environmental Protection Integration Program. Bottom line, it's a buffer program. How to make sure that every person before they go somewhere they're asked to go is trained back here first. And again, not to tell them too many war stories, but be surprised how many bases don't fly helicopters up to 10 o'clock at night because the complaints are night vision goggles, blinded by the light from cities. You know, again, I'm biased, but we don't need somebody going anywhere and for the first time using night vision goggles in an Apache helicopter. That's the whole purpose of why Congress passed this law. It protects land, conserves land, all about that. But every penny, and this year was 175 million. And we're thinking the Senate and House right now probably 180 million for this next fiscal year. Every penny is spent to make sure that the airmen, soldiers, Marines all can train back here at home exactly like they're going to be asked to do in other places. And full disclosure, I have my stepson deployed right now to Poland, and so there's several thousand of his fellow soldiers. So again, it's real time to us, means a real thing, and it's a privilege to work with Hill. We all know, I think, the F-35 mission here, not to share anything that's not known, but the priority of Hill Air Force Base to the Air Force, especially in this area, the training is, we'll just say it's right up there. That's why we're being funded, and will continue to be funded, in my opinion. Next slide, please. So eligible entity, again, they passed this law in 2004. I just got back from Iraq, and I get to the Pentagon, and they tell me, oh, you know, you can do this one thing. And I said, what's this new thing here about working with people and stakeholders? And so the rest is history. But the Congress in the law says an eligible entity is who does all the interface with the landowners, does all the negotiations, holds easements, conservation easements, restrictive easements. It's not the military's job to go in people's living rooms and talk about conserving land and serving the base. Everybody has a full plate training their soldiers and airmen. And so an eligible entity is either two things, one of two things. A state agency where conservation is their mission, or a nonprofit land trust, which we are based in Oklahoma, 501c3. And our job is not a donut around the base, because, and again, the previous speaker brought up a good point about residential development. Well, on Hill, for example, we got all the barracks, and they call it the cantonment area, where all the houses across the fence are fine. I mean, it's compatible. But where the southern end of the runway, or where the northern end of the runway are, those are places that, you know, I need to be compatible land use. And the quick answer is we love ag. Cows and corn, don't care about the sound of freedom, how loud it gets. And, you know, obviously this is a great place for that. And so I'll go ahead and just jump to the next slide, please. So that's us, again, 501c3. We're 8 persons strong, and we have more bases than any other organization. Other groups that are eligible entities are Nature Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited, Trust for Public Lands. That's probably the top 3. And they have members of all of them. So they all have great missions to protect water, wetlands, land. We're the only land trust in the world that was started to be a partner for the Pentagon to conserve land around the bases, or anywhere outside the bases that need to keep compatible land use. We've got a base in Texas that's 80 miles away, land we want to preserve, because that's where the bombers go by and that's where they do their training. So again, it's all tied to training and testing, and both of those happen at Hill Air Force Base. So again, we can blow through this. Bottom line is we're the instrument of the Pentagon for the services, in this case, Air Force at Hill, and it's our job to budget, work with the base and landowners. Now, I mentioned I appreciate some of the landowners we're talking with right now are here tonight, so I appreciate their attendance. It's been great. I'm preaching in the choir, but it's great people here. You know, they have a heritage, they support Hill Air Force Base and the men and women there, and so it really is, we're proud to be here. So how we do it, 3 main tools, all in the legislation, in the congressional authority that was passed by Congress. One is we hold conservation easements. The second one, restrictive use easements, are more in this area for Hill, where if a landowner promises, and I say promise means legally, on an easement, hey, we're just going to keep doing what my dad did, my grandpa did. Farming, ranching. Awesome. We will pay them a one-time check to say that from now on, and that's the key. So if they have plans to develop or sell to residential developer, they shouldn't talk to us. Because what we want is, the land use currently is to keep it called in perpetuity forever. We pay them that one payment, once a year we call them up, and when it would be convenient to stop by, we have to by law come by annually and make sure there's still a barn there, not a high-rise apartment complex. And I'll speak from the biased opinion, those easements are flexible as heck. If you're not gonna build houses or giant, nothing against wind turbines, but 250-foot wind turbine next to where the F-35s fly, you can put all the barns you want, all the equipment, construction, anything, agriculture, ranch, build to your heart's content. If you have houses on that land, that's fine too, just can't build new houses. So it's very open as long as the family, the owners of the land, plan on keeping doing what they're doing. If they're not, it's free country, God bless America. So if they're not, we just really shouldn't talk just because we're here to preserve the land that's the way it's currently being used. And then the last one, feed purchase. We can do that, the law allows that, Pentagon prefers an easement, it's cheaper. So it's more economical for the Pentagon. But in some cases, including the Hill, where we had some folks who decided that, they wanted to sell their land. So we purchased the land. We put the easement on it and we'll figure out how to give it to somebody, because again, we own probably 20,000 acres around the country, because in a lot of cases, folks pass away and the kids say, I'm going to the big city. And so they don't want an easement on their land. They plan on Texas, again, a good example. We have 7 bases there. They're going to Austin to live and have a good time. And so they just want to sell. So it's the last resort, but we can do that just as easily as we do an easement. And that second bullet's really important because a lot of times we've gone to bases where I talk to a family and the first thing they say is, you took my grandpa's land in 1944. True, make the base bigger for the war effort. They paid them, probably not enough, and took the land to eminent domain, condemnation. By law, this program is the opposite. Can't touch it. No way ever will any of this be condemned land, or it's willing landowners only. That's how it's written in the law. That's how the Department of Defense policy is. And that person can change their mind the day we go to closing for an easement. Again, we way go to the right on this because we don't want anyone to think that it's something that someone's gonna come and make them do something. Willing landowners only. And then I mentioned that monitoring and enforcing is once a year. Darren will call up and bring a picnic basket, or if it's snowing, I guess a snow shovel, but to the landowner, and just an hour there to make sure we fill a 2-page form out as a nonprofit land trust that shows that we are monitoring it. The enforcing part is our responsibility also. We've been doing this for years, we've never had any enforcement. Again, good people, good easements that we're all comfortable with, but God forbid we ever have to, because again, we would be responsible for the legal actions if somebody wanted to take the money from the Pentagon and then build apartment complexes. So, next please. So again, for Hill specifically, those check marks, that's all been done in the last 2.5 years. There is, again, full disclosure, because that's how we operate. There's a priority of land. Based on, again, my previous job at the Pentagon, I ran this program for the Army countrywide. There's certain bases that, based on the mission they do, certain lands are more important that, they got developed incompatibly, big impact on training. Other lands would have minimal. So again, when we start these programs, we come to the base, the trainers, the operators, the flight crews, talk to us about what they do and where they do it at, and how the frequency of training. And so that determines a map that says, snapshot in time, new weapons or new planes change things, noise changes things. But these are the priority areas we need to go after first. The good flexibility about this program is it's 30 to 40 years. This is not a short term. Every year we compete for money, and every year we do darn good with the office I used to work in. And it's good because we have good bases. We can defend the impact we have on these restrictive easements, conservation easements. And so for Hill, we've got a priority area 1s and priority area 2s. Priority area 2s are mainly a little north, South Weaver, that area. Our concentration these first 3 years has been on the southern end of the runway. And to be, not to share anything, but based on today's meeting, I think we'll probably get additional funding to look at the northern end of the runway real quick also. We receive DOD approval every year. We have to match up with, we bring funding to the table. We'll talk about that in a second from other sources. Our favorite acronym is OPM, Other People's Money. That's how we do the business. That's how we're able to get scored higher. There's a scoring every year that the Department of Defense does for every 104 bases. Air Force brings their list in, Army, Marines, Navy, and it's competitive. They met a couple weeks ago, December 15th, give or take. They'll make the decisions on how the pie gets separated, and that's part of what we do is we explain that all bases are good that need to be protected, but our 14 bases are the most important in our unbiased opinion. But next slide, please. So currently what we're doing here at Hill, and again, Darren is the man. Darren's on the ground. He lives here 24/7. Left him up going to Alaska next month for, if you guys have been to Fort Wainwright, you want to go to northern Alaska next month, let me know, because I think somebody take my place. But current activity, so we are discussing the landowners. Well, family, not to point you out, but awesome people. Great working with them. A lot of heritage there, a lot of generations in the land. And so we talk again with willing landowners. The due diligence or things that's required, like a survey of their land, they have appraisal, so they'll know, how much we can pay. Environmental study, probably 4 things. Title search. That's kind of normal real estate transaction things that we do, and Pentagon pays us back later on. The third bullet I touched on a minute ago was that mutually beneficial partnerships. One of our best partners is the Department of Agriculture Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS. The law was changed for this program 4.5 years ago in Congress. It said that every dollar we have, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, NRCS can match it, and it's matched. Usually there's a federal match and a state match that you're familiar with. For this program only, it's like you gave that money. So we love USDA, NRCS. When we go to talk to a landowner, if their land qualifies and we compete, if their land, NRCS says it's good farmland, we want to protect it, they'll match half the money, 50%. And so I go to the Pentagon and say, hey, I've got $2 million here from the Utah NRCS. You give me $2 million from the Pentagon. It works. And so we've probably we've got about 2.3 million so far from Utah NRCS, and we're in the hopper now for about 4.5 million more. And that means I need to match it with the Pentagon's money, which we'll do. We're on our way for that. So based on the land values up here, I know we're going to spend it. Not a doubt in my mind. But so again, groups like that give a higher score for Hill, provides quicker, more money, and allows us to then leverage other great things being done. Once that land is conserved, there's all kinds of added values for water quality, of climate, for wildfires. All these other things are additional benefits that are allowed once you do that. Easement says just keep on doing what you're doing, don't develop it, residential development, that kind of thing. And we just completed a closing last month with the landowner, and fingers crossed I get a call tomorrow for another closing with another landowner family in the next couple of weeks on an easement. Again, these are all, the initial ones are focused on the southern end of the runway, and I can just honestly say very quickly we'll be doing continued focus on the southern along with some additional funds for the northern. I think tomorrow we're going to see a gentleman who lives, I guess he could have hit that jet with a baseball if it was on the other side of the fence. So rightfully so, he has some concerns, and this may be a program for him, may not, but it's willing landowners, but we're going to talk to him, and he's expressed a desire, and so we'll see where that goes, and we'll get the funding for what we need. Last slide again is discussions, questions. I know I talk way too fast. I've only had 6 cups of coffee, and but again, most importantly, if there's any questions, I apologize again for the acronym, but it's a complicated program. But again, that's why the partner, the eligible entity, is there to do this, and that's why we talk to the landowners. And there's a big tax benefit to the landowner if we do since we're a nonprofit. Most people would have to pay money if they get paid $700,000 for an easement. They have to pay taxes on it. And again, based on the 501c3, we can mitigate a lot of that. I'll finally quit talking, and if the council has any comments, or I can.
So I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Now that you've explained your program, that kind of gives us some more insight as far as the length of time that it takes to put a deal together. What's the average time?
So the average Joe time is 9 or 10 months. The average time for across the program is 1.5 years easy. If you bring the NRCS in, it could be 2.5 years because they're talking about their money for the next fiscal year. So it was, but again, we tell the landowners, if you wait longer, we can pay you more because we'll get money from NRCS. But if you want to just work with us and depending on with that program, 1.5 years is, maybe takes longer, but 1.5 years for the Air Force, we've done it in 9 months. Again, no offense to anybody, but it's usually the attorneys at the Pentagon who are not trained in this. How would they, they can't spell ready. And so they spend a lot of time going back and forth with them on, I'm sure it's an important job they have. But that is, if we would talk to a landowner tomorrow, and say, hey, we're interested in fee simple, or interested in putting a restricted easement on our property, before that time, before tomorrow next year, we'd already done a closing. Hopefully before that deal, shorter than that. We had a couple, again, just starting off here. It's about building some trust with the community, so it takes a while. I understand that. But like we're hitting the road running now, and we've got 2, if not 3 in the chute, so to speak, where we've got things done, due diligence, it's at the Pentagon. It's just a matter of, we've got the money in our bank account.
That's what I was gonna ask next. So any of the deals that you have going on around here within this city, it's already funded, right?
Funded, but we haven't, again, I don't want to get too personal with the folks who we do deals with, but not signed yet. Again, they could change their mind tomorrow. So the amount of the appraisals, some cases significantly more than, we've got over $3 million in our bank right now, and we've asked for almost $3 million more this year. And we're gonna have, on top of that, maybe $3.5 million from NRCS. That's not enough to cover what we're talking about 100%.
Okay.
Our model is here, each base is different, but here is 75% the Air Force will pay for. And so we have to negotiate either a tax break, a bargain sale, things like that, or find money from NRCS, which then allows us to pay 100%. So a lot of moving parts, but if I was a person, again, a year is a good planning factor. And I'd like to see a lot quicker than that, but certain things I just can't impact, we can't impact. Usually it's the staffing.
Anybody else have a question?
With the timing, so what do you do when the value changes within that year time?
I'm glad you asked that, because that's primarily why we don't have enough money, is because after these appraisal has to be within 1 year. And so we've taken a couple here at Hill where it's gone longer than 1 year and doing no appraisal. The new appraisal will just say it was very good for the landowner, I'll just leave it at that. So, but we have to go back, get new money that fiscal year for it. And again, we're doing that, and I'm confident, not an issue there. It's just that we are talking 7 figures, so we're talking that it's going to take a little bit. And again, not to please don't take the wrong way, but yesterday's incident is a postcard for why we do this program. And people have heard, not just here, have caught that, and we're going to use it to our advantage. No one knows who's in the Super Bowl? Cincinnati Bengals? Nobody? No? Okay.
So how many acres did you identify then?
So we've, the priority area 1, which again, that's going to take several years, so we focused on, I'd say about, give or take 100 acres, 2,000 acres, and that's primarily Southern Runway, South Weber, and a couple places that are pretty far away that do a training that the jets go to. But that's, if we had all the money in the world tomorrow, it's about 3,000 acres worth that we would conserve compatible land use. And the good thing is that if the mission changes, there was a reason why we need to include more land. It's pretty simple nowadays. We can increase that program by 10% with a colonel signature, kind of at that kind of level, as opposed to going all the way back up to generals and the Pentagon. We have several bases, Fort Hood, Texas, where if you knew we drew these lines 10 years ago, 9 years ago. Now, these other properties need to be in there because they're being impacted by noise, dust, all that kind of thing from the tanks in their case. And so we're able to get a 10% increase in landowners, so now we have again, more funding we go for and more landowners to talk with.
Yeah, I gotta ask this question then. I know this is, so knowing how the aircraft is now, and we're primarily dealing with aircraft and their acceleration and projection is a lot quicker, do you ever see this area shrinking whatsoever?
The base?
Yeah, within our boundaries?
I'm not qualified to answer that, but at my 33 years and last thing on, No way in heck, and probably for bad reasons, not good reasons.
I'm sure that would be a question.
Can I ask a question, or
Yes, ma'am.
is it just for the high?
Oh, I'm sorry, no, I should be quiet. This is
You know what, normally, given the time, I'll entertain it, sure. Ask your question.
We're talking, our family is talking about agricultural land, but I live in a house and there's a lot of existing homes that were there before even Hillfield. Are you gonna buy those houses out eventually?
So if we're a willing landowner wants to around Hill Air Force Base, it's in a priority 1 or 2 area, they want to do a easement, restrictive easement. So whatever, if there's one house, if there's 10 houses, the appraisal takes account of the values of the house, that allows how much we can offer them. So if there's houses, higher value, obviously. The houses stay there. But at our level, if there's 2 parcels pretty much equal, one has 6 houses, I'm exaggerating, one has no houses, the priority for the funding is going to go to the one with no house. It competes more against other bases because it's undisturbed land. If you're a homeowner and your land, you enter in a restrictive easement, whether it's for Hill, keep living there, we have nothing to do with the house. If it gets blown over, you can build it up again.
What if I don't wanna live there anymore?
Again, your choice is, ours is to protect the land use compared to what the base does.
But they can't resell though, right?
Oh, heck yeah.
Oh,
Well, yeah, the easement
Okay.
goes with, that's a good question. The easement goes with the land, not the person. So it's in perpetuity, so it's on a deed. So if you go to sell, that new person, you can sell to whoever you want. They have the same restrictions as you. They won't get the check. They're on the same restrictions. But we have several folks who have even grandkids, not sure where they want to build their house on their acres for their grandkids. But we agreed an easement, a certain 1 acre lot or 2 acre lot is called a floating home site. They can decide 20 years from now, but that's allowed somewhere in their easement, and that's pretty flexible.
I think you'd knock them down.
I know there. Again, they've been there. It's just that the noise, the sound of freedom gets too loud for somebody. That's the choice. But right, we don't buy houses.
But what about, like, one wrecked last night, one wrecked 20 years ago and on our property? Is it gonna wreck again tomorrow and take my house?
Well, that's a great question. Again, luckily for me, I'm not in that lane. My lane is.
Are they not
certainly-
worried about that? Take these homes and buy them and move them or tear them down, or?
Well, I think if they were in the clear zone, which again, not to put too many words, that the clear zone is where I call the crash zone.
Yeah.
No houses are allowed there. But
Well, they are there.
well, again, we wouldn't tear them down. No houses would be built there anymore.
Right, they can't be built there again, but.
I'm kind of glad that they really can't tell a person to leave if they're already there. It's their land and their house. But in this program, we can only, the status quo. And then again, it's the landowner's land. As long as they follow the easement, sell, buy, stay.
Okay, well, like I said, I opened it up. Is there anybody else that is curious or want to ask any question?
Well, again, thank you all for
Typically, we
your time.
don't, but this is a good discussion, and we all want to learn from it, so I appreciate you, Joe, coming in and educating us on it.
Glad to. And
Especially working with our citizens here.
yeah, they're good people.
Oh,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
sorry.
When you do an easement or, I guess even the purchase, is there a certain time frame that the landowner is unable to sell it without having to pay it back?
No,
And they sell it immediately, so they can take the check on Monday and then put it up for sale on Tuesday?
we have an action, so the answer is yes, and not to get too much detail. We have folks who buy it, it's not an easement yet, they buy this property with a house or not a house, and they come out real quick, and half the money they just spend on the house, got the months because we gave an easement. So both ways, but exactly. There's and again, this sounds a little crazy, I know, the first time, but from the time we talk to the landowner, to we do appraisals, and we agree and sign a non-binding sales contract, all that, to the day we're walking to closing, they can change their mind. There's no penalty, there's no earnest money, there's no loss. Again, this is on purpose because of what it was back in the day, the whole eminent domain. This program is willing landowner to the day they get a check. until we hand them a check. I got a headache, I changed my mind. Thank you, sir, I hope you reconsider. And it happened a couple times, and after the neighbors got a new pickup truck, other things, true story, they came back, because it's like, they plan on doing this in the land, so why not take a check?
What if they were paid out before on a, say like just a residential use, and now you're coming in on more on a ag use?
Well, so again, the easement, the actual verbiage, restricts the land use from the time you sign that easement, pay them, that date and forever, the land use only being, compatible, that's what they use for that.
Okay.
If there's an existing house, again, in a perfect world, should have houses probably in some of these places.
Right.
Not our call, not our decision. But, in some of these easements here, the Utah DOT, Department of Transportation, has easements on navigational and other things. So when the appraisal's done, first thing is the title search, we have a list of all these back to 1940s, restrictions. And our appraiser looks at that and says, appraiser looks and says, well, the value is here, but they already have these restrictions, so the value is actually here. And that's what we base the negotiation on. And one thing we'll mention is, we're kind of proud of it, and we should do it, so why we do it is, all that due diligence, we find local companies. We've got a great appraiser company here. First time I talked to them, pretty high price. I said, hey, however for space here a long time, that's the price best people ever had. So the survey and the boundaries, the title search, title company 2 miles down the road, all that is done locally, so that money, not much money, we're small, but 50 to 100,000 a year is going to local businesses here for doing the process for these easements.
So if the homeowner decides to back out at closing, are they do any of the fees for doing the appraisal or anything like that?
Nothing. All the closing fees are covered by us, it really is zero, that's why it sounds crazy, but it is, because it actually prevents, the law says the base can't get any bigger. True story is Pentagon, so all the generals went to the Congress and said, we have enough land to train like we fight. We'll train like fight. But we have to back off our fence line because encroachment. So if you just let us keep this land and do a buffer program, so we can use all of the land we currently have, Congress is sure, in the law road, you can't get any bigger. So we can't have where the base makes an extra area of the land plains in somebody's buffer zone. So against this big bright wall, willing landowner, eligible entity, nowhere in that is the Air Force, except if Joe decides to become a home developer, we're going to take that away from compatible lands and find another eligible entity.
Does the homeowner itself have their own chance to do an appraisal, or is it based on some sort of formula with the?
We ask them, do they know today? Yellow Book is the appraisal standard for the Air Force, a little different from the Army, so it's a little extra, pretty in-depth, a little more expensive. But first thing we ask them is, qualified appraiser. If they know one, we'll hire them. Like if you're qualified, obviously, but if they know one, we hire them. Same with any service on their land, if they know somebody that's qualified to do that, we get to build that trust. So, as long as you're qualified, we're glad to do it. We've done it before. Most folks, they're not sure, and done it a couple times, they've used the one that was qualified, and no problem.
You guys have any more questions? I know you had a question. Go ahead.
Joe, I've had a few correspondence with you. Dan is my dad.
Yeah.
I was talking to another homeowner that was offered an easement, and they mentioned that the easements were extremely restrictive in the sense that you had to have planned out outbuildings prior to the easements, and they weren't able to add like barns later on. Is that accurate?
Or move fence lines.
Or move fence lines or anything like that.
Right, so in the quick answers, that's not correct for us. If we're talking buffer program at Hill and that, in the easement, it allows any agricultural building, not an extra barn, you get storage for the tractor, whatever. As long as it's ag or agriculture related, there's no restriction.
And does it have to go through compatible lands or
Nope.
you can just?
No. We go once a year, we come by once a year, and so, in the form fills out, they need, there's an additional barn there. Under the paragraph so-and-so allowed.
Right.
If we came in, there was 2 more houses, that's when a serious problem. So that's where its restriction is. You can't build any more residential homes. Right, the violation, but anything with ag, any of that, and also the planning ahead, not our business, just as long as it follows the easement restriction. Which again, for Hill is ag, hunting, fishing is obviously great, fine. commercial light industrial, depending on where the parcel is. But, no restriction on agriculture, that's a good thing about it.
Okay. So, I had a follow-up to that.
Sure. I'm sorry, I probably talked too long and
Sure.
that's your concentration on.
I just forgot it, but, the bases or the government's definition of ag, does that generally differ from what a city's definition of ag could be? You mentioned, hunting, fishing, light industrial, whatever, that's not all included in ag necessarily, right?
The easiest answer for that is that the Department of Agriculture, USDA, their definition of ag is, again, I feel really safe saying that's the definition.
Okay.
It's probably the each is I'm trying to think of as a height restriction. So if somehow you wanted a giant silo 100 feet tall, that would violate the easement. But I can't think of any single agriculture structure or support that is not allowed.
You mentioned you didn't have any enforcement, and I'm an attorney, so sorry, but.
And no one's perfect, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it seems improbable that you wouldn't have any enforcement. So what are some issues you may have post-closing with folks that are maybe not, oh, this looks really great, what are some?
So what we have, and again, I failed to mention, is that monitoring enforcement that the partner does. We initiated endowment. So when we have the closing, we lobby, ask for, beg the service for additional amount of money to endow that land's easement. That way, if God forbid, down the road we have a violation, we have money that's been growing and we use that money for the cost. But a violation, the quick answer is they build a new house on the land. That's really not the only, but that's, other than that, what we're doing now, you can do more of. It's just, it's a residential thing. And the height, again, and any new buildings, a small thing, but any new buildings, even agriculture, if they have lighting outside, have to be done probably like the city, where it's down because of the light pollution for the night vision goggles. So it's probably city code too, but that's another restriction they could violate. They could build something they didn't know any better, they didn't read the easement, they have giant spotlights. Well, we need to change those because it impacts the flight vision, but really violation, the only one that again, there's been none, zero. We have 14 bases, 30,000 acres under easement, 7 states. I've never had a violation because it is flexible, and we always make sure, if you have any plans, we always ask them to bring your kids with them, talk to the house, bring your daughter and son over because they know you're not going to be here forever, and so we need to make sure they're comfortable, and sometimes they're not, and the deal's not done, and that's good. But we really have had no violation. Well, the one that might work, I'm sorry, like southeast of Mississippi, where it hasn't happened to us, but it's a lot of trees. So we know that longleaf pine is a native tree, so don't chop those down. You do your sustainable forestry program, sell some, but always keep there. So someone can't clear cut 500 acres of that tree, that would be a violation, I'm almost for sure, on the ones out there. Thank you.
Yeah, but it might have been covered. Well, so one thought I've always had is our APZ zone, you call it zone 1 or?
APZ 1 and 2,
Okay.
and they're priority area 1 and 2, so the buffer program basically overlay those.
So, I don't know if it was my understanding, but my thoughts that restrictive use easements are already in place in all of that, or is that not the case?
It's not the case where, in some cases, light industrial or commercial is allowed currently, and for each base is different. The base here, their idea of compatible in a perfect world is obviously no residential, but no light industrial or commercial. Now again, certain parcels may be different, but the rule, the easy answer is those things are not restricted in all the current restrictions, and so that's the part we're paying for. And you can't build houses, no development, have gaugeful easement for that, but those bundle of six that are worth money for like commercial and industrial, those are values that we pay not to be exercised by the landowner.
Those easements aren't.
I was just gonna say, presently in that area, everything has the residential restriction. What you're saying is not everything has these additional easements on it at present.
Exactly, and I hate to say everything because I may have missed something, but right, all the land we looked at so far has either the 1978 or so Department of Transportation in Utah restricted easement. Some have some from way back for dealing with the base on the jets, usually probably biplanes. But so yeah, so I wouldn't say everything, but everything we saw.
And Gary, I mean, these are restricted easements, so they're not going to be granting additional property rights that were never running with the land to begin with. They're restricting what was on there, but now is not allowed in the easement itself, but not necessarily granting rights that the city itself is not.
That's great.
Yeah.
Zoning and the land, property interests are two separate things.
Yeah, and we love zoning. The example we always use, folks say, well, my property zone, for, again, ag only. True, but, well, only better me, because zoning could change a year from now. And this program is long-term, with the new missions ain't coming here, we gotta go 100% surety. And so, yes, it may be zoned now for no residential, we can still put easements on it to say, in the easement, no residential. That's what the program needs to have. In your earlier question, I forgot to mention, I think it's just for tonight, if you're willing to join the Air Force for 3 years, you're given 3 extra years for free. I was supposed to, maybe we weren't supposed to mention that too. So after the meeting, I'll stay around if you want to talk, but I'll make sure. You're halfway there. How many push-ups do you do? I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you again, I appreciate the education here.
All surrounded, Baron's a man. Thank you.
Well, I think that those really we covered everything that was on our work meeting agenda. Was there anything else that you needed to talk about?
We don't need to, but we wanted to offer on the regular water conservation amendment.
Yes.
And Mr. Jackson is here. Not put him on the spot, but if you had any questions, I think you sent out the latest report, your water report. It was very positive. So I'm not suggesting you should, but if you do have any questions, you're certainly welcome to ask Steve if you could speak about that, or Terry as well. If you don't, you can certainly respond to him in the regular meeting as well.
Yeah, he's got it covered in there, right?
Yeah, Terry will do that. I don't know if it's going to go into the whole water conservation report as opposed to the amendment, but we can do whatever you'd like.
You guys have a preference at all?
I don't have a preference, just a question about the differences. So there's the amendment, and then there is the authorization to sell the bond piece that goes along with that. The list that goes along with it. I just need some clarity on this, the amendment piece, or excuse me, not the amendment, but the bond. That's item 5C.
The states require. Yeah, maybe we can talk about, there's kind of three components, so
Both of them
five.
have the state.
Yeah, so 5B is actually an amendment to our ordinances for water time of use restrictions. And that is a component of this bond requirement that the state is placing on issuing this bond. So they require that we restrict water use from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. throughout the watering. So that's 5B. 5C is the actual bond documents. I'll let Gary maybe cover more of that. And then 6A is the water conservation plan, and it's kind of a totally separate thing, but it just happened to line up with the schedule. So that's really where we're at. But Gary, you want to talk a little more about the bond and what we're...
Sure. So we're actually making a loan from the state for the water meters, which you're aware of.
Right.
And part of that is the state requires bonding to be put in place to guarantee that we will make payments and, as those meters are purchased. This is the first step in bonding, which is a parameters resolution. You have to do that by state law. You have to set the parameters of what your bonding is going to be and introduce it to the council, and they have to look at it. And generally, they make the amount higher than what you're actually bonding for, just in case that changes over time. But this is the first step. bond council actually has put this together, and this is the first step in going forward with that bond. And the next thing we'll do is we'll have a public hearing, and then and then the bond will be finalized at that point. So it's a parameter resolution is what it's called.
Okay, and based on the information that's in here, it has to be less than 200,000, but of course, like you said,
2 million.
excuse me, 2 million, but it said at the end, if we carried it out all the way through the 20 years, it would be more than that, but it's our expectation that we'll pay that off prior.
Right, it's less than that, it's 100 and,
It's like
I think that's right,
170,
Mayor, 172,
172 or 176, I remember.
somewhere in that range, but good question. Thank you.
Which regard, just emphasize, all the bonds, Utopia does all the bonds. Thankfully, we haven't done a lot of bonds in Layton, but this exact process is virtually followed in every time any municipality or county, any kind of government entity issues a bond, you have to do this. Bylaws, the same process. So to us, it was frankly a little odd at this stage where they have access to our taxes before we get them. They just have a contract that says we're going to pay you, and if we don't, you can keep part of our sales tax or something, but they're making us go through exactly what we would do if we were going out into the private market to get bonds. I guess that protects them somehow, but it's a lot of work and some cost to us to do it, but that's just the way they've chosen to do it. So there's bond attorneys that are happy, right, with the project, because they can replicate it multiple times. I'm not trying to be negative, but several $1,000s a pop, and you just have a simple contract. But nevertheless, we're doing what they told us we have to do. We actually pushed and encouraged, is there another way to do this that doesn't require these funds to be spent? And they're not saying we have to work with bond attorney, and we've got a significantly reduced price for them, if we do the case. But they said no, this is the process. And
So you have to bond even if you said, hey, I just want the cash for it.
yeah, we looked at that, and anyway, I'll stop Clinton.
My understanding that the state was offering the grant.
Yes, and that, I was just gonna mention that.
Grant money, this is the other part of it, you have to
Yeah,
take the rest of it in a bond.
yeah. The loan.
At 1% though.
But still, we're still, that's supposed to be 70%, or?
Yes, so 70% of the cost is coming in that $5 million grant, and we actually received the agreement for that yesterday, so that will be coming up in the next meeting. We'll present that to you.
I'm saying $5 million for the grant.
There's $5 million for the grant, and then an additional $1.8 million bond loan, and then we need to come up with $319,000
Cash.
city cash.
So why didn't the bond cover the additional 300,000?
The way that the
It's kind
bonds
of
are
like your down
structured,
payment, right?
it's a 70-30 split with the ARPA money, and then it's a 25.5% and 4.5% split with the bond and the city payment. But overall,
You gotta make it complicated.
yeah.
If we were gonna bond ourselves, then we would have bonded for the whole thing. We're gonna issue a bond, we just bond for the whole thing, but the state stipulates the terms of the loan/bond, right? So
Yeah, that was the question.
we can't just add the additional 319 in. Normally, we would. I mean, if we're gonna issue a bond, we just issue a bond for the whole thing.
Right.
Well, we can understand that what elected officials do. There's some bonding.
I'm not a bond.
There's the developers, there's their staff.
Yeah.
Just for clarification too, the $5 million grant has the same ARPA stipulations on the time to spend that all of the other ARPA money does, so that is part of the timeline, and that's why they granted the 70%, and then we need to spend it by 2026, so.
The grant, is that money exhausted? I'm sure from all the people who have applied for it? Or are there people who are not applying?
No, they did not spend all of that. There's still some.
Is there a time frame that?
Yeah, it's 2026.
No, I mean for when you can apply for it?
No, I don't believe so. I know that the money, looking at maybe Tyson and even Rick over here, is there a time frame that you're aware of for applying? I think it's
No,
just,
they're opening their third round right now.
yeah, it's just until the money's gone, but you are under that stipulation of the ARPA deadline first.
So for
And
kids,
then the money, the percentage that the state is willing to kick in drops dramatically after that second year. So that's part of why people are encouraged to get it done soon.
After 2 rounds, they talked about UEOC water meeting, they talked about raising the cap on, so that some of the larger, say Pineview, for instance, or Beaver Basin, so they can get more to cover their costs. Because, I don't know, Rick, I'd say Pineview's probably more of a 20%, 80, because they have so many more connections, but the cap limited how much they could get. But the UEOC decided they'd like to reach out and give some of these smaller systems another opportunity that haven't applied yet. So do some education.
They're also talking about taking some people out of it, so.
I'm glad you guys filed when you did, so we're in.
I didn't hear that.
I mean, this is good money.
What's that?
People who can accept it could lose it?
I haven't heard that. Have you heard that, Rick?
Some smaller counties are trying to get out of the
They're trying to
requirements.
get out of the requirement.
Oh, yeah.
The requirement.
I guess it was just bizarre, like they have extra money that no one's applied for, but then they force everyone to do a bond. She might just use the money that's left over instead of buying.
I'm gonna go fast.
When you say we gotta use money by 26, define use the money.
They gotta be installed.
So it's gotta be straight.
It's got to be installed by 30.
So the law says 2030, but the ARPA money says it has to be spent by 2026 and actually appropriated in 2025. We aren't gonna have a problem with that because we've got enough work and we're just gonna start rolling. I mean, you could buy all the meters up front and almost cover most of it. So
How is the supply chain on the meters anyway? I mean, does it look like they're,
there's some challenges with different brands, but we're being told from the master meters end that they've got some supply for us, and we just need to work out that distribution of takedown. So,
They're on it.
yeah, they know it's coming, and they're actually the same meters we use for our culinary water, so they've been supplying us with those as well.
what's your
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And you said by 26 we'll be done?
We anticipate being done by
Oh, okay.
2026.
I know how much work that is.
That's, was gonna be my question,
Yeah.
projection wise, how many do you think you can install in a season?
From what, we've talked to Rick and some of these other groups, but they're projecting anywhere from 5 to 7 to 800 in a kind of winter cycle.
Yeah.
We anticipate we're gonna have to install during the summer, and people are just gonna have to let us, take their service off for a day while we get it taken care of, and then they'll be back up and running. But, yeah, we
can also hire companies to do
Yeah.
it, just decide what crews can,
Yeah,
we
we're
want
gonna-
to do that.
So we'll outsource it?
Yeah, we're gonna hire, we're actually preparing a bid document right now.
That's what we do.
We should see your truck. We could do it. Tina, we could do it.
Get y'all some shovels, Clint, is that
Yeah,
what you
let's
want?
do it.
Six shovels?
Back in New York.
No, we just wanna, we'll start a company.
I'm not letting you get away with a lower fee though. I'm forced in the market.
We're
not
not
getting a lower
gonna,
fee.
yeah, you're on attorney.
Terry, I've asked you for a ride-along. I want to do a ride-along with you guys.
You'll get a work along.
Several other companies have already sent things out. I know Davis Weaver's already sent some notices out. We got a notice from Beaver Basin that they've got an area they want to install 500 meters in Layton here over in the spring of 23. So people are moving, and we're planning. We've got our bid documents almost prepared to where we're going to send it out to bid here shortly, and then we're going to get started as well.
Yeah.
Will the work only be done in the off-season when the water's off, or will it be done year-round?
We're not anticipating that. We're gonna do it during the season as well. It'll be strategic. We've got a lot of backyard connections that are probably gonna be hard to find in the winter if there's snow, and so we're gonna have to, it'll be a fun project.
Yeah.
Well, I think the idea of strategically getting Case Creek on board now. After the funding, it's a nice job. Imagine trying to pay for that, so.
Can I add a related question?
Yeah.
So we've conserved all this water.
Yeah.
At what level is our coordination with other municipalities?
As far as.
So you got this Great Salt Lake stuff going on with the speaker, and he's telling everybody that we've conserved 9 billion gallons of water. Where's the coordination with the cities?
So I actually attended the AWWA conference in Vernal a couple weeks ago. It's American Water Works Association.
Sounds like a good time.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
You said it was Vernal.
Vernal, man. It was a good conference, but all of the big water districts are involved in these conversations. A lot of the cities, we're not an anomaly in the amount of water that we saved this year. There's quite a few other cities that are saying they're seeing 20-25+% water reduction just across the board. So I think as far as that goes, the big water districts, Weber Basin, Jordan Valley, Central Utah, a lot of those are having much higher level conversations because they kind of manage those supplies, and you know, they're talking with I think that's where the speaker is getting his numbers from, is those big districts. But as far as what I've seen and talked to other cities, everybody's doing the same thing. Some are taking a much more drastic, fines and violations approach, and others are doing what we did, which is saying, please help us, this is the information, and then having people respond. But overall, as a state, people have got the message. We hope that they continue to get the message. Unfortunately, the big topic at this conference was the drought, and the projections are not looking great. They're thinking this is going to be the third year of this problem for the water resources. And if Tracy will plug his ears, I'll say that we're saving a lot of water, and that's really great. But there is a revenue component that we're going to have to have a conversation about, and we're going to have to look at budgets and moving projects to make the balance. And that's what we do, and we'll just move forward.
The big water districts that will jointly come together and committed to 30,000 acre feet is what they
Right away.
was willing to give to
I know
help.
about
I've heard some numbers,
For the lake,
but
yeah, so that's where that
I'm not
came
sure all
from.
the details of that.
I guess the one about just related again is that if he's saying 9 billion and Lake City is 1.1, something's not driving if one city is more than 10% of what the state's saying that they're conserving, so.
Yeah.
We're that good. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm saying it's on their side.
Yeah. It may very well be that they're taking into account some of those big districts in their contracts, but not necessarily the water that we're pumping out of our own wells, things like that.
Or aquifers, or how's the aquifer?
Yeah, it's hard to see the immediate changes in it, but there were some presentations about the aquifers in the state and what's going on with those. Provo's doing a $120 million project to shore up their aquifer and some things that they have going on. So definitely things we keep an eye on and want to make sure that we're not mining water, I guess, is the term.
Some of the cities didn't have conservation efforts.
Some of the cities in kind of the Salt Lake area,
Well, Utah County.
They
I
actually
went
have,
down there in the summer and it was green.
and they have water rights, they're priority right holders on those
Yeah.
streams, so they actually get the water first, and so I wouldn't say that they didn't have conservation efforts,
Yeah,
but maybe they didn't have major restrictions.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Well, I know that we're supposed to get a storm this weekend. It brought to my attention that we do have a lot of folks out there that are using culinary water still.
And we're trying to help them out. And
Yeah, send the message out.
I stopped today,
Yeah.
coming back from lunch, a gentleman was sprinkling his lawn. So I stopped and got out and told him, sir, you can't do that, you passed the deadline. And once he didn't want to kick my butt anymore and wanted to know who I was, it's like, who are you? And I'm thinking, got it in my home? Okay. I'm the director, you picked the wrong guy. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know there was there is a deadline. So you're right, there are those that, matter of fact, we hit a couple of them today. An apartment complex had a leak.
Okay, well, thanks, but I would say, I guess what I'm gonna say then is, I know we got the storm coming in, but let's say we go through another spell where it's gonna be good weather and people are gonna be foolish enough to think they still have to, water their lawns. Let's maybe put something out on social media and just say absolutely not. That's just crazy. All right, well, thanks you guys, thanks for everything. Let's go ahead and adjourn this meeting and reconvene in the other room. Thank you, Mr. Zach.
Yeah.
I got this from
Our Layton City Council meeting this evening, it's October 20th. And I'm going to turn the time over to Councilman Bloxham for the opening ceremony.
Yeah. Please rise with me. We'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. After me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to go ahead and offer a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're so grateful to gather together and to discuss the business of the community in which we live. We ask you to please help us to have keen minds and that we may be able to be instructed to do the things that are best for those to whom we represent. We're grateful for the freedoms that we enjoy, and we're grateful for the voices that we have in this council and in this city and staff, that we can discuss these issues and find the best strategy. We're grateful for our policemen, our firemen, our public works, and all those members of our staff who carry out the business of the city, and we ask you to bless them in their services. And we ask you to bless each and every resident, that they may be safe and that they may be able to raise their families and have an enjoyable life. Help us again to have thy Spirit to be with us today. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councilman Bloxham. Okay, tonight, do we have any municipal announcements you guys would like to offer up? Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night, Parks and Recreation will be hosting the Halloween Bash at the Constitution. Is it over here?
Maybe over here at the amphitheater.
Over here at the amphitheater. Okay, I'm looking at Director Price and Mayor to help me out. But 6 p.m., is that? 6 p.m. Come bring the whole family for a lot of fun activities, and let's celebrate Halloween. Thanks.
Okay. And I believe there's going to be, did we get the train set up, correct? Okay, this is something that's just for everyone to know. We're actually going to be having a small train available so that you can load your kids in the train and let them go for a ride around the park. And so it'll be another added feature that's kind of fun and different. So thank you to the Parks and Rec team and the Rotary Club, I believe, on this.
Yeah, and they have a good-looking engineer.
Oh, excuse me, there's the engineer.
That's right.
That's right. Okay.
I've got a couple of announcements. So October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and Safe Harbor, the shelter that's here servicing our county, is going to be having a benefit on November 17th at the Davis Conference Center. Also, the Davis Arts Council has started their small stage series just across the parking lot here. And so that is running from October through April. And they have a group coming on October 21st at 8 p.m. Stephen Farr, Larissa Humphreys, and Vince Humphreys. And on November 4th, they've got Questley Bunch. She's an excellent singer, and she'll be singing at 8 p.m. for free. And that's a nice segue to OPA, because they have, they're showing Macbeth starting in the next couple of weeks. So lots of cool arts things happening in the city, and want you to participate in as many things as you can.
Very good. Anyone else have anything they want to add to it? I know that there's a lot of different events going throughout the city regarding the trick-or-treating and trunk-or-treating, or the troughs and treats, whatever. So just look on the city calendar, as well as Facebook's got a ton of them listed. So I think it'll be a fun season for the little ones. Okay, I'll go on to our verbal petition tonight. And Mr. Price, are you going to join us? Okay. Why don't you come up? I think it'd be good. So we want to recognize two of our citizens this evening that have given a lot of time and dedication to the city on our RAMP Commission, which is our Recreation, Arts, Museum, and Parks. And we have two of them here tonight. So maybe we'll start out with ladies first. So Miss Delaney Nalder, if you could come up, and Mr. Price, if you'd want to
Give a thank you.
yeah, give a thank you as well. And I know Clint is also, or Councilman Morris is also over the Ramp Commission, so maybe between the three of us, we're going to let you know how much we appreciate you.
Well, Delaney has been with the ramp, first the ramp pick, as they worked to have the election go in a favorable manner for ramp. She volunteered tirelessly through that time.
Maybe a little tired.
A little. And then since then, she's been 6 years with us. And that's 3 consecutive terms of 2 years, and has done a wonderful job. The last half of that time, you've been with as the vice chair for the Ramp Commission, and done a wonderful job leading the organization through that. And we know this takes a lot of time from your family and home, and we are grateful for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, you can't sit down yet. No, this is going to be a nice appreciation here. Because I got to say, Delaney, I know that you've done your homework on a lot of these grants. You've certainly questioned them, and you've really dug in and set a good example for the rest of the commission as well. So I just personally want to say thank you. You've done an excellent job. And I know that there's lots of other positions around that you could easily fulfill. So while I get up and walk over, Clint, did you want to add to this at all?
Sure. Maybe for both Delaney and for Rick, they take that responsibility of these funds that come from taxpayers, and it's a true stewardship. They're resourceful, they're diligent, they're professional, and each of the projects that they have approved to be funded have helped our community in great ways, and I'm grateful for your service as well, and that you're still here, you're still involved. I echo what the mayor said. Don't rest too long. There's other things to do here in the city, and just thank you both for all that you've done for Layton City. Appreciate it.
So Delaney, we have to give you,
thank
want
you.
to make sure you have this certificate to tell you thank you on behalf of the council. We do appreciate all your time and service. Thank you. Okay, thanks. Excellent. Okay, now we get to be able to show our appreciation to the chair, which is Rick Smith. So, Mr. Price, did you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, again, as with Delaney, we are just so grateful for your assistance and your help. And the Ramp Commission has to sort through a lot of information and make some difficult decisions. And we have very lively discussions at times. Rick and I have not always seen completely eye to eye, but I have always respected and appreciated the intelligence and the way that you fought for the ideas that you held. And I appreciate that. Again, 6 years is a substantial amount of time. And we know that takes you away from your family, and we appreciate the time and the energy that you put into this. So, thank you.
And Rick, I'm going to add to that because I know that you were very instrumental in, we came up with our original bylaws and operating procedures, and you were good to point out some improvements there as well. So I appreciate that. And I think, if anything, I think the whole committee learned to be aware of O&M. You're very diligent about that, and I appreciate it. So I just want to extend my appreciation for all your service as well. And again, you guys can only rest for a small period of time. So with that, I'll go ahead and bring you your certificate. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Again, I'll give you.
All right. All right.
Yes, you did a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone who would like to make a comment, please do.
So I just want to say to both of these guys, and just in general to everyone, I'm lucky enough to call both of these individuals friends for many years. And, you know, I joke with people sometimes that I'm on the city council, but I'm the last to know about some things. And these two individuals, inside and outside, well outside of the realms of the RAMP Commission and their responsibilities on that commission, they'll bring things to my consideration that are important to the city, and that it's obvious that they've put a lot of thought into and that they're passionate about, and I thank them for their service and how they've helped me in my roles. So thank you very much.
Well said. I agree on that one.
Yeah, I remember when I first came in to be a member of the council, I was thinking, I always see the same faces all the time. And Delaney and Rick are at things that don't even involve RAMP. They're at lots of city endeavors. And so what I say, 10% of the people do 90% of the work. You are 10%ers. And so we're grateful for all the service you've given Layton, and we couldn't do it without you. So we're sad to see you go, but we're glad to still have you part of the city.
Sure. Anyone else?
Am I the last one?
No, it's okay.
I'd just like to talk about Delaney. I don't care about it. You started off something that was much needed. You made it into something now that it has a bar, and you raised that bar. You didn't concur all the times with everything that maybe others thought you should, because you felt differently, and you voiced that. And because of that, the other people that are on the commission now have that feeling within them that they can speak. And I've been in a lot of commissions that people don't. They just follow whatever, and they're, you know, nothing ever happens. And the RAMP has, to be honest, I would say it's probably one of the best commissions, along, I'll say, with the Planning Commission, and I'm sure I'll miss something, but those two are the two that I've respected the most. So congratulations on that.
Thank you again. We really, really appreciate all your service. So, okay, with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our citizens' comments. So if anyone in the audience would like to step up and make a comment, you're welcome to. Please state your name and address, and as long as it's an item that's not within our public hearing, you're welcome to speak on it. But if it's an item that's listed under the public hearing, then we'd prefer that you hold those comments till then. And I also just want to add one more thing, that the council is here to kind of listen and to take notes. They're not going to respond, but that does not mean that action will not be taken. So again, you're welcome to present your items, and then just know that that we will take action. So thank you.
Hand these out?
Sure.
Okay. Visually. We're just looking at it. Oh, okay. Thank you. How are you guys today?
Good.
Oh, fantastic.
Thanks. Thank you.
My name is Martin Weiser. I live in East Layton, just off of Sunset and Antelope. And I would like to present a possibility. This may seem like it's outside of your jurisdiction. I'll get to the point. So the intersection of Hobbs Creek and 193, I would like to see a light, a T-section light. I have talked to UDOT, one of the engineers at UDOT, and they said there's two stipulations that has to comply with. A stoplight can't be within a certain distance of another stoplight, and it can't inhibit traffic coming off of the freeway. If we put a T stoplight on this intersection, it would essentially be a reciprocal stoplight of what is at, is it 2400 and 193. So it would be just single directional. The reason that I think it would be necessary is that intersection I feel is very unsafe. I try to turn left there all the time. It's very, very difficult, especially between the hours of 3 and about 7. Impossible to go straight. You might as well just, put a gun to your head because it's a death wish. So I know that this has to do with the Department of Transport, but I also know that because it's in Layton City, you guys have the ability to sway their opinions and what they want to do. Right now, they do not want to put a stoplight in there. They have other plans, but I think this would be in the best interest of the community for several reasons. So the benefits that I've got listed, it would allow people to turn left and access businesses from the neighborhood around the Hobbs Creek intersection. It would help keep the speed of traffic in place. I've seen people come off that hill pushing 75 before, and when you're trying to turn left into Hobbs Creek and somebody's going 75 and the person behind them is going 40, it's a little bit frustrating. And they also will often cut off a little bit of your lane. So sometimes when I'm turning left there, I hug the far outside lane just because I'm worried about getting hit by those guys. Third, it would be a safer option for people driving. Fourth, it would allow people to turn and access, all the directions in the adjacent neighborhood as well. And it may help people turning east from 2400 merge more easily into traffic if traffic is slowed by the light. The drawbacks, obviously, it's a stoplight. It's going to basically reduce time for people to get to the freeway if that's where they're going. And I'm sure that you guys have other things, other pros and cons that you can think of as well. So my proposal in this is that you present this to the Utah Department of Transport with the option of putting a T intersection light there, as well as a light at the top of the hill that indicates when that light is turning red, essentially, the signal traffic light. I don't know what you call those. And that's all I have. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was well presented, and we appreciate your notes here, so makes it easy to help us follow through.
I'm going to leave now because I've got to coach a basketball game, so thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, could we get a phone number maybe?
Oh,
Mr. Weiser?
excuse me, before you leave,
If he's willing.
Get his address too. You didn't give me his address.
we need your actual address, but then we'd like your phone number, and you do not have to give your phone number over the mic, but if you could pass it on to our city manager there, that would be much appreciated. He just said Sunset. Is he writing it down?
I'll get the address too.
Okay, that will work. Okay, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to comment? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and move on to our consent items. And the consent items, we have 3 of them this evening. And again, this is items that the council can, that are considered routine, and the council can enact on them in a single motion. So I believe the first one up is going to be covered by Mr. Lon Kroll, which is an amendment plat for Eagle Eye subdivision.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you mentioned tonight, we have before you an application to amend the Eagle Eye subdivision, which is a commercial subdivision. The property that we are talking about is on the corner of Gordon Avenue and Angel Street. Currently, it's 2 parcels. The applicant would like to combine these into 1 parcel. This is an easy application in our world. The only concern that came up in the Planning Commission is an access easement that divides those 2 parcels, which the engineering department is working on vacating. It will no longer be needed. The purpose of this subdivision is the applicant would like to construct a 60,000 square foot warehouse manufacturing building that's allowed in this zone. It will have an office component. And other than that, it meets all of the requirements. On September 27th, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this subdivision, and staff recommends the same recommendations the Planning Commission with the applicant meeting city requirements. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Do you have any questions, council? I mean, there's already an existing building just to the west there, right? So kind of. Yeah, and Classics to the south of there, yeah. Okay, well, that was pretty easy.
Yes.
Looks like it's, oh, I didn't know if you had anything more. So next up is going to be Terry Colburn. So you're good, Lon. Thank you. Quick and easy, we love it.
Thank you, Mayor. Bring before the council a couple items, housekeeping items that the state has laid upon us. The first one is Ordinance 2225, an amendment to the Layton City Municipal Code Title 13, Water and Sewers. The legislature of the state of Utah passed House Bill 242 during the 2022 legislative session, which addresses the metering and pressurizing secondary water and requires that all secondary water systems be metered by 2030. The Utah Board of Water Resources has established a program allowing for grant funds and low-interest loans to be made available to secondary water providers in order to mitigate some of the costs associated with House Bill 242. Layton City has recently acquired the Case Creek Irrigation Pressurized Secondary Water System and must purchase and install 2,380 secondary water meters in order for the city to be in compliance with House Bill 242. The estimated cost of the project is approximately $7,140,000. The board has awarded the city $5 million in grant funds to be used for the project. The board has also authorized a low-interest loan in the amount of $1,821,000 to provide additional funding in order to mitigate a portion of the project's costs. The city's estimated participation cost for the project after the grant and loan funds have been applied will be approximately $319,000. The low-interest loan has a few final approval stipulations that must be met in order for the low-interest loan funds to be released to the city. One of the stipulations required by the board, interesting, is for the city to adopt an ordinance prohibiting irrigation of landscapes between the hours of 10 and 6, which it's been for the 48 years I've been here. The amendment to Title 13, Water and Sewers, will add Section 9 entitled Water Conservation, under which we will add the landscape irrigation prohibition as required. Staff recommends the council adopt Ordinance 2225.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions on this? I know we went over it pretty in-depth in our work meeting, but okay.
Thank you.
There's none. Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to item number C, which...
Thank you. That would be me, Mayor.
Oh,
So
okay. I was
I'm
sorry
replacing the
about
finance director temporarily here.
that. Okay.
That's dangerous.
Well, yeah, you know, for the moment.
Yeah, he would probably do a better job. Anyway, I think Terry has covered what I was going to cover, which is there's a $5 million grant, which is Layton has been awarded. And Layton City has a responsibility. It's a 70-30 split for 30% of that amount, or the total amount of $7 million roughly. Mm-hmm. And so the state has required us to actually bond for our portion, so they make sure that they get the repayment. And so this is the first step in bonding, which is a parameters resolution. Parameters resolutions generally set something higher than what the total amount of the bond really will probably end up in being, and you've noticed that the amount is indicated to be a little bit higher at 2 million. It's really what we need to pay is probably about 1.7. It's in there somewhere, 1.8 million.
It was 1.8.
And then we also need to put up some cash, around $300,000 in cash. It also sets the interest rate, which for everybody in the state of Utah is 1%. It sounds like it was previously negotiated. And the number of years to repay it, which is 15 years. And so that is our parameters resolution. That's the first step in our bonding, and we'll move next to a public hearing on the bonding, and that's will appear before you again. So we'd recommend approval of Resolution 22-62.
Okay. That was very well stated. Pretty clear. Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, I guess maybe with this loan on the books, does the city have a preferred strategy if we're paying? Are we paying it off fast, or are we have the cash? It's 1%, but I don't know if you have a kind of direction of travel that you typically use on these.
Right. Yeah, we have discussed that internally, as we mentioned before, with regard to what would be the best from a financial perspective, given the inflationary pressures that exist and the issues that Steve Jackson raised earlier about water revenues. We felt like we were best to preserve our flexibility. And as we work through the budget process and work with the council, mayor, on priorities, we'll want to talk about this issue. Our general preference has been that we like to avoid debt and to pay it off. 1% is a very good interest rate, but I think it'll be about, from our perspective at least, be a balance of are we able to have the funds to pay off the debt early and preserve the interest payments and still not affect projects. And so if there are projects that are more important than the financial gain by paying it off early, then we'd probably recommend we continue to hold it. But you guys will be intimately involved in that prioritization. But typically we would like to pay the debt off early. But there's also some very important water projects that need to take place that are independent of this project, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, we haven't tried to presume. We've tried to preserve the flexibility and work with the council as we go forward on what's the best course, best use of the resources.
Well, at 1%, I don't see, I mean, I know we'll make those decisions going forward, but you can't get much lower than that, really. So I think it's wise, a good bond to get involved with. Let's put it that way, especially for the reasoning behind it. Okay. Any other questions?
Can we go backwards? Can I go back to item B for a second? Steve, do you mind? There you go. Read my mind. The last sentence, I've just been thinking about that the last couple minutes. I'm considering, it says it's protected by agriculture operations, basically protected by the zoning, so by the agriculture zoning. And this got me thinking about smaller agriculture operations that might be happening outside of the agriculture zone. Say someone might have a 2-acre piece that they're doing a high-intensity vegetable farming.
Oh, good question.
But they wouldn't have, am I reading that right, that they wouldn't be protected, they wouldn't have the ability to water between those hours if they were in one of these other zones?
That would be, the way that it's written currently, that would be correct. It's interesting because the way it's written, agricultural zoning is not capitalized, so it doesn't identify the actual zone. So it could be interpreted to mean anything with an agricultural zoning purpose or designation. Yeah. I think it probably is okay. And the reason on your RS zones, even though it's not called an agricultural zone, it does have an agricultural zoning designation. In other words, you're allowed to raise horses and so many chickens and so many, that type of thing. I think we're okay on that. Unless you want to be more specific. If you would like to be more specific, we could.
Would something like bona fide agriculture operation?
Sure.
We talked about agriculture definitions in the last meeting.
But let me ask you this, though. Wouldn't the written approval by the Public Works Director override that or give allowance to that area?
Yes, I think what you're asking is as of right. I think you're asking a question regarding agricultural uses generally have permission as of right to be able to do these things because they have the state exemption. And
But
actually
in
the
reference
state,
to the micro, basically I'll call it the micro farming.
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
they
they-
get they could get approval from the Public Works Director
Yes,
to
yeah.
continue, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
the way
actually,
I read that.
There's 2 avenues there to
Yeah.
make it legal.
you could actually look at it as when they received approval on the, whatever the zone is, they've actually received approval from Public Works, from zoning, everything to do the things that they do on the property. I think you're all right on it. That's my feeling. But
Looks like
if you want to add that
Mr.
word, you
Jackson
could.
wants to weigh in on this, and
If
then
I
I'll
could as
entertain
well,
Mr. Morris.
the intent really is for landscape irrigation. And so, that was just, we want to make sure that we're not going to affect agricultural uses and things like that, but it really is intended to be for lawns and flower beds and things like that. So it's not necessarily meant to necessarily restrict people who are doing agricultural type things, as Gary's mentioned, so.
Okay. Councilman Morris, I believe, had a question?
Yeah, just the sentence before, this restriction should not include supervised hand watering. That's not supervision from Terry.
That's you
That's
supervising your hose.
That's when I've got my hose in my hand
You're
and
going to
water
go
a
stand
tree or
and hand
flowers.
water
or-
your
okay.
plants. We don't
Gotcha.
want to restrict people from doing that. We don't need people out there at 3 a.m. watering their flower beds, things like that. So we don't want people to call us when you're doing that either.
Hey, there's your exception, Councilman Roberts, is if you stand out there with a hand watering system, you're exempt. You're good.
Yeah, my little half-acre patch might take a while. Okay.
I think we're okay. on
Are you
that,
good with
that's
that?
okay.
Okay. All right. Once again, that concludes our consent items, so I'll look for action on behalf of the council regarding these items. So I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve consent items as listed. Item A, amended plat for Eagle Eye subdivision. Item B, amendment for Layton Municipal Code Title 13, Ordinance 22-25. And item C, Resolution 22-62.
Oh, second.
Okay, it's been moved and second that we adopt the consent items as presented. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move on to our public hearing portion of the meeting, and Terry Coburn is going to come up and present the information regarding our water conservation plan.
A couple things before I address that. One, Tyson, I'm going to step into the farming realm a little bit. I look like a farmer, don't I? Don't you get irrigation water at different times of the day and night throughout the growing season?
Specifically in in ag zones, I would say for sure. But a lot of these urban farms would be using secondary water or sometimes culinary water.
Because this was meant just for the people between 10 and 6 because they think that the water's evaporating, and now there's all kinds of different
Yeah, I think
theories.
Steve's point that it's focused on landscape is helpful.
Well, I'm stepping out of the farmer business. I would be remiss.
Anytime you want to come by, you're welcome.
Well, you wanted your ride along, but it's got to snow first, okay? And I don't want to come. You guys work. No. I'd be remiss on the previous item with the grant money that we got for secondary meters of $7 million roughly. Is that right? Pretty close, maybe 8. If I didn't say that was mostly due to our engineering people, led by Mr. Jackson, and then his water assistant, Stacy, who we always try to get to hire full-time, but she just wants to work part-time. But that's a great get, and it was a quick out-of-the-gate get. So kudos to them. Bring before the council ordinance 2224, an amendment to the water conservation plan. The Utah Department of Natural Resources, Division of Water Resources, has updated the Water Conservation Plan Act, Section 731032, Utah Code annotated, requiring all providers of public culinary water that serve over 500 connections, we have about 20,000, give or take, to submit a water conservation plan containing existing and proposed water conservation measures and goals. The WCPA also requires that providers update their WCP and submit it to the DWRE every 5 years. Layton City adopted the original water conservation plan by ordinance 1646 on December 1st, 2016. The DWRE established a renewal date of December 31st, 2022 for the city to submit their updated and city council approved WCP to the DWRE, and staff would recommend the council adopt ordinance 2224.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on this? I know it was a pretty good read in the packet. Okay, seeing that there's none, then I'd look for a motion to open the public hearing and entertain any comments. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the public hearing is now open, so if anyone wishes to comment on the water conservation plan, you're welcome to do so. Once again, step up to the mic, state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing that there's no comments at this time, we'll go ahead. I'll bring it back to the council to take action. I'll need a motion to close the public hearing and then action regarding ordinance 22-24.
I move that we close the public hearing and that are we adopting this amendment or accepting?
Adopting it.
And adopt the amendment ordinance 22-24 for the water conservation plan.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we adopt ordinance 22-24. Gary, do I have to do a roll call in a public hearing? Okay. Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and start with the roll call vote then. I'll start with Councilmember Thomas.
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Smith Edmondson.
Yes.
Councilman Morris.
Aye.
Councilman Bloxham.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something before I vote. We see a lot of these plans. There's these big packets worth of stuff. We see it for all these different issues. But where the rubber meets the road is what the citizens do and what we do as a city. And the engineering sent us an email and said that year over year we saved as a city 1.1 billion gallons of water in this last year. So you can have this nice, beautiful plan. It can be so many pages, but if no one actually cares about conservation, then it doesn't really happen. And so I just think that there's I like the symbolism of passing a water conservation plan, that we've been very proactive about that in the city. And the staff have done such a great job of making sure we have all the information in front of us to help get the word out to the citizens. But it's the 83,000 plus members of their community who've saved those billions of gallons of water, and or conserved those billions of gallons of water. And it's such an important thing, and I just like to see that we follow through with our plans. So with that, I vote yes.
Okay. Councilman Roberts.
I'm going to follow Councilmember Bloxham's example and say something also. About the citizens, and we talked about, we recognized two great citizens tonight, and each one of us got an email from one of those that read our packet as well, and really, I appreciate a professional like Rick Smith to, look at what we're doing in the city with who has firsthand knowledge in the water realm. So I appreciate you looking out for us. We can read it a lot and not understand a lot of it or most of it. So with that, I vote yes.
Okay. thank you very much. Voting is unanimous, and I will also echo the fact I appreciate our citizens and all that they've done. They stepped up this year, we'll see what next year brings, but I think that if anything, we've hopefully created some good habits that we can carry forward and continue to conserve our water. It's a precious resource, and I know that we've got good stewards here that are overlooking it, but it really takes all of us to pull this off. So once again, thank you very much. And with that brings, thank you, Mr. Colburn. That actually brings our meeting to all the business has been taken care of, unless there's any unfinished business here. Does anyone have that? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Hey, yay. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.